Welcome back, and we continue, as we will all hour, on focusing on issues that where we imagine Dr. King would say, for all the progress, also some of the challenges still behind. And in this segment, we focus on family and how challenges to the black families may be impacting black life in America. And our first stat, teen birth rates. Now, these numbers from 2011 here, but I think they're pretty applicable. All Americans, 31%. White teen birth rates are 21%, and look at this. In the African American community, almost 50% here. And again, some of the numbers coming from Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Now, out of wedlock birth rates in 2011, I think many people would be surprised, almost half of all Americans of all births were out of wedlock births here. When you break it down by race, whites 32% and blacks nearly double that at 63, almost 64% as well. And under single parent households, all households here, if you take a look at numbers out of this that have one parent, it's about 27, almost 28%. And in black households, one parent at 55%. Okay, let's put a context on what that means. And in many ways, Mayo, you come on the back end of this equation. You've been in basically the justice system your life, both as a prosecutor and now as a defense attorney. Are you starting to see if you can draw some of the parallels, some of the consequences for the changing family dynamics? And listen, we have many success stories, even at this table, of people that have come through single-parent households. But nonetheless, it does make a difficult job even that much harder, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And if you really stop and look at our economic situation across the board right now, we are all worse off than our parents were. So if you stop and you realize that the money we earn doesn't go quite as far, or you could not buy that same house. In fact, quite often people who were able to purchase a house in a particular location within the tri-state area could not buy that house today if they were at the same age with the same economic conditions. Much of the wealth that we have is handed down, so we're really talking about inheritance. If I'm a teenage unwed mother, I haven't had an opportunity to develop a wealth base. If I am coming from a single parent household where maybe my parents were teenagers, they probably haven't accumulated much wealth. So when they do pass on, there's not much coming to me, which means I don't have much to give to my child. So as much as it is, yes, a consequence of what we do in the schools, it's also what we as individuals do, because if we have good parenting and we have wise decisions in the household, then we present a student to the school that's prepared to learn, that's really in a position to do well. But in addition to that, I sit down with my wife every day and I look and I say, well, really, children are competing not just against their classmates, but they're competing against their classmates' parents. So if your parents are engineers and doctors and lawyers, they're going to be in a position to help you with math and science, where if your parents didn't finish high school, they're not going to be in that same position. School is becoming much more challenging. Also, you're not going to have the resources to hire someone to give you assistance. So you won't be able to hire that tutor or have that after-school program. And to go back to what Superintendent Ross was saying, yeah, really the budgets are not there. There is no money. We choose. It's a decision.
If we could get to the money in a second, but the stigma, and listen, it's a declining stigma everywhere. This isn't a black household issue alone, but the numbers staggering. And I'm going to ask to speak from the female perspective, then I'll get to the male perspective in a second, Reniqua, but is there a stigma anymore attached to not only having an out-of-wedlock birth, but expecting and being surprised if the father's going to stick around?
Well, that's a really complicated question.
And you got less than a minute. Yeah.
I think. May I help you with that? Sure. No, I think that what we're seeing in America at large, we're seeing white women follow what's happening to the black women have been doing for ages, right? So this is definitely an overall American problem. We look at our popular culture. We see Hollywood celebrities, right? We see tons of out of wedlock births. So some of it's a larger symptomatic of American culture. Do I think there's a stigma? Of course, being a young black woman out of wedlock, absolutely. When we had the trial of Trayvon Martin, we saw one of his friends, Rachel Jontel, get onto the stand, and just being black and overweight and female. Yeah, society puts tons of things on you, I think. But is it particularly having birth? I think it's there. I think the stigma's still there, absolutely. I think it's particularly bad when you see someone like during the presidential elections, they talk about, black people wanting things. We still see the stigma that kind of welfare queen is around. But is it the most pressing thing that I think is going through the minds of a young black woman, who's just trying to make it and seeing her food stamps being cut? I don't think so anymore.
We didn't see the stigma with Sarah Palin. So
her daughter, you mean? Her daughter.
Let's call it, let's call it what it is. I don't think there is enough shame. I think we've lost class and shame.
There used to be, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's part of the problem, and I think it's a secret in the black community, the churches, places we no longer talk about. People got pregnant, you went away to visit your grandmother, you came back. Today we think it's progress to have schools for pregnant, girls. We have lost a sense of shame in this country. I am not taking over, right.
You're showing your age.
I'm surprised as an Episcopalian, if I were a Baptist preacher, I could get away with this, but I really think that we've lost a sense of standards and decency. And in the black community, we're afraid to talk about it, but as you say, it's crossed over to society.
Oh,
But
definitely.
here's the thing. Of course, you could say that we've lost the shame of it, but I also think that, men, used to stick around and take care of their families.
Let the Reverend jump in there, because
that's a problem.
the
So
idea that,
there's
forget
no
about even
incentive.
staying in and coming under the same roof, the idea that they're going to pitch in and make the monetary commitments and be a presence, it seems more naive than not, and more than that, the consequences, and you talk about not having a male presence in the household, it's not just a good soundbite for TV, it's very real.
It's very real. I always, TV and studies, they always seem to ask the wrong questions. And I go back to my original statement, and I want to go back to civil rights for a minute. When people decide to do bad things because it feels good and have no regard for the consequences, whether it be stigma, criminal activity, you have a serious issue in your society, in your community, in your home. And we're at a crisis point now where it takes more than two parents to start getting involved. Sometimes it really takes the law enforcement community to assist in this type of behavior, because this is a willful, voluntary act to copulate and have children outside of wedlock for whatever reason, because they're enjoying the pleasures of sexual activity with not thinking about the responsibilities, even though everybody knows, including the participants, that there is a responsibility that goes on here. So I go back and I say, where is the internal restraint? Where is the moral code to say, I shouldn't do this?
If I could, Dom, I'm up on a break here, but you've been very vocal about this, right? And you said for all the problems, and racism is still very real, we'll get to the criminal justice system and all how the deck is stacked against the black community in many ways. This is one that drives you crazy. You speak in communities about this.
Drives me insane.
But why don't you get more support that this is the one thing that could be, if you can control this, it would make the other challenges not easier, a lot easier, but a little bit more attainable.
It's what the chancellor said, the superintendent. If I could have these four people speak across America, I think we could solve a good deal of the problem in the black community. There is no shame no more, and particularly in the black community.
I noticed you left out the white guy, but go ahead. Yeah.
No, you're a brother. You're a brother too. But let me just say this one thing, Pastor. The one thing as you were speaking was going through my mind. There was a song that was on all the radio stations, and the song went, "That's just my baby daddy." That's just and it's supposed to be cool. The MTV and all the rappers, and it's disgusting because it's a cycle that's never ending. And I grew up in a single family household as well. It's never ending. And the black woman with the rich tradition of the black woman, she's doing everything she can to keep the family structure together. But us men, we got to get our acts together. And yes, there are other factors at play, Richard. There's racism and so on. But at some point, you got to stop with the excuses, and you got to somehow try to build yourself up a little bit.
We had the standard.
Yes.
The 148th Street that I grew up on. If my mother or any
That's
woman
right.
was walking down
That's
the
right.
street and Rich and I were the two drunks or even drug addicts, when they came by, we sort of tried to help
Straighten
ourselves up
right.
and straighten up until they went by. And we drank it in a brown paper bag because we had that much respect for the community. I used to make kids laugh at school when my mother got off the subway at 145th Street and Broadway to walk those 3 blocks up the corner. If anyone on that block had said John and I had done something, I used to say she was getting the strap ready. My father never
one of the things
beat us, but the point was the neighborhood raised the kids. Today, people come to school and ready to kill me for even saying something to their kids.
I got to hit a break.
It's
the
the
one math
opposite.
thing out of this is
It's the
it's
opposite.
hard in any household to raise and pay the bills with one salary. To do it with only one and not two, just from a practical level, forgetting everything else, that's part of the challenges and the realities of 2014. All right, when we come back, education. The panel's mentioned here how critical it is and how it all starts there, but how do we fix it? I'm going to give you some numbers. I know he knows the numbers, but I'm going to give you some numbers that are going to make you do a double take here and the consequences that stem from that. We'll be right back.